Hey, welcome everybody. Great to see you. Welcome to our Sunday teaching. My name is Venerable Tarpa. Today we're going to be exploring the Buddhist concept of right effort. And I think it's actually a very fascinating topic and a very, very important one that has great impact on our lives. I'd also like to share that today's retreat day here at SBT. The last Sunday of every month, we do an online retreat. So all of our gang is here. We've been practicing since the early morning. We took a day of observance vows. We took the 8 precepts. We've been doing teachings and meditations all day, and including some Sangha chat and just having a delightful time. We love our online retreats. And here we're about halfway through the day, and I'm going to give a little teaching here. So when we talk about right effort, well, first of all, let's define effort. So we can think of effort as being synonymous with exertion, striving, diligence, enthusiasm, vigor, or energy, right? We could even call it our will, right? That effort. So, and when we use the word right from the Eightfold Path, we're talking about right. We're talking about right isn't so much correct as it is proper, right? A proper effort, a skillful effort, a productive effort. It's that kind of imagery we're using for the word right, more like proper than it is some kind of a absolute or correct. So we find right effort throughout the Buddhist traditions, both in the Theravada and the Mahayana. In the Theravada, it's very clear, first and foremost, as part of the Eightfold Path, right? We have right view, we have right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. So right there, right effort is front and foremost in the Eightfold Path, and then repeated for the Mahayana is part of the 6 perfections, which is supreme generosity, supreme goodness, supreme patience, supreme effort, supreme concentration, supreme wisdom. So you can see that right view is front in all of the things that we do in Buddhism, a concept that was very, very important to the Buddha. So with that said, within the Theravada tradition, there's a bit of a tension that's there when we talk about right view, and it's always been there. And it's there because oftentimes the sutras, for those of you who have studied the Pali Sutras, there's a lot of tensions within the sutras. There's a lot of seemingly contradictory things that go on in the sutras. The sutras aren't as clear and readable as we'd like them to be. Oftentimes, critical and very important aspects of the Buddhist teachings are kind of scattered throughout the Pali teachings. They're not as clear as we want them to be. And everyone agrees with me. That's why they came up with the Abhidharma. In the Tripitaka, the Buddhist canon, there's 3 parts or 3 baskets, and that is Vinaya, which is ethics and ethical code. There's Sutra, the words of the Buddha and his close disciples, and there's Abhidharma. Traditionally, the Theravada tradition believes all 3 were written by the Buddha. Historians say that the Abhidharma clearly was written hundreds and hundreds of years later. And Abhidharma is an interesting subject. And basically what it is that it's the taking of the sutras, the second basket, and trying to make sense of it, trying to put it into a presentation and a curriculum that could be easily understood and easily studied. So clearly, even the early masters of the Pali and Theravada tradition They agreed that the sutras are hard to read, they're hard to study, they often contradict themselves, so they created Abhidharma. Now, what a lot of people don't know is there isn't one Abhidharma, even within one canon, right? So to kind of break it down, we have three Buddhist canons generally in the world. And they're in Pali, it's called Tripitaka, meaning three baskets, because there's three parts. So those three canons is the Chinese canon, the Tibetan, and the Pali. The Mahayana canon wasn't preserved, but it is preserved through the Chinese and the Tibetan. So those are the three canons that we choose from. So now when we have Abhidharma, let alone do we have a different Abhidharma in each one, they're basically the same. They're all very similar. But even in the Theravada tradition, in the early days, each school was known for their particular Abhidharma. So there isn't one Abhidharma that was passed down from the Buddha, but instead there were many. And the Theravada tradition in general was known as the tradition that had Abhidharma, right? Anyways, a little history for you there. So the tension that we find ourselves with in this, we talked about a tension with right effort, and we talked about a tension that exists on many subjects within the sutras. And the tension here comes from two passages or two teachings within the sutras. And I'm looking at my notes a little bit. Okay, so the one is seemingly advice from the Buddha on practice. And this is on right effort. So on one hand, the Buddha says you should practice like your hair is on fire. And this comes from a great teaching on which the Buddha talks about the world is on fire. All things are on fire. And just a little bit of a history on that, or clarification. The sutra is quite interesting, and the Buddha claims that everything's on fire, and then in the sutra he says, what is on fire? The eyes are on fire, the ears are on fire, the senses are all on fire. And what he's using fire as a metaphor for passion, for desire. He's using fire as this metaphor for the way we exaggerate reality, our busyness, our speediness, our sense of immediacy, right? That everything is in the world is so immediate. Everything seems like it's so important, has to be done right now, right? And with our passions, right? All the things we see we want. You could see that being a pretty good fire being a pretty good analogy for that, wouldn't it? That all the things we see and we want, it's like our eyes are on fire. All the things just smell like when you walk into a bakery. It's like your nose is on fire with all these desires. And then when we flip that and we think about the opposite of cooling, of putting out the fire, of soothing, of mellowing down, this is awakening, right? The Buddha would call it becoming dispassionate. But I think passion is used quite a bit different in the scriptures as it is nowadays. Nowadays, we have a very positive view on passion. Passion is inspiration to us, right? It's the joy in the artwork we do. It's that passionate actor, passionate musician. We see that positive side. In the sutras, though, they see passion more as desire, unquenchable desire, right? This neurotic wanting, needing. So they use the word passion quite a bit differently in those early sutras. So you can imagine the world is afire with desire, right? And so this is the metaphor for fire. So when the Buddha says we should practice like our hair is on fire, it really gives us a certain picture, right? That we should practice intensely, more intensely than anything else. And that it's so immediate and we have to do it right now. But again, there's a tension. So that's weighed against other passages, which I think are much more important. And I'll lay out my argument. And the other presentation comes from the story of the Buddha's enlightenment. And this is actually the basis of the whole Buddhist middle way path. And it's the story of the lute. And probably many of you know about this. So a lute is a stringed instrument like a guitar in the old days. And the Buddha's watching a musician tune a string on the lute. And he notices that if the string isn't tight enough, the string won't play. And yet, if it's tightened too much, the string breaks. And in his wisdom, he saw a great analogy here to practice. That if we practice with too much intensity, we can break like the string, or let's just say be unproductive. But if we're too lax, we have the same problem. We can't practice. So it's said in tales that this is where the Buddha had the idea of the middle way. Because remember, in the Buddha's enlightenment, before achieving enlightenment, he was in some very intense ascetic practice, right? And they talk about the practices like of starvation that the Buddha would eat. I've heard so many different numbers about how many juniper berries and how many pieces of rice he ate a day. There's a whole bunch of different stories on that. But he practiced starvation, fasting, him and his friends. And they would also do other things, sleep deprivation, even stories of, it's clear that at this point in history, these are Jain practices from Jainism. And Jainism to this day continues these kinds of practices. They're known as being very strong ascetics and believing that punishing the body and the suffering that arises from that as a viable path to awakening. So the Buddha practices these, and he realizes, the Buddha's on a path to finding the answer to why people suffer. And one day the Buddha just realizes that these practices aren't bringing him liberation at all. In fact, they're only making him suffer more. So in the stories, the Buddha goes down to bathe, which is they're not supposed to do either. They're not bathing at all. He goes into the river, bathes. A young girl sees him and realizes that he's breaking his vow of asceticism. And she offers him a bowl of rice milk, and he takes it and he eats it, which does not please his friends because they all believe that he's broken his vows and he's no longer a member of the group. And so this is a big change in the Buddha's path. And then from there, he discovers enlightenment. I'll leave that story to another day. I want to get back to this idea of right effort. So we have these two tensions, right? We have this tension between the Buddha finding the middle way in effort, right? He believed that ascetic effort, that intensity and effort just didn't work. And it wasn't until he abandoned that and in practice in a middle way with right effort did he become a Buddha, did he become enlightened. So in the sutras, we have these two tensions. And I read a nice piece, I believe it was Bhikkhu Bodhi, right? And trying to, everyone's trying to be, apologize for the sutras and trying to find out, well, there's a reason why that conflict exists. The idea was that the advice of practicing like your hair is on fire was more about related to samsara. And the idea is to, again, like in the Buddha's words, to realize the world is on fire with desire, with passion. And realizing that we should oh, I'm looking at my notes. Okay. Develop this real sense of urgency and deep commitment to escape samsara. So supposedly that's what the first is related to. We should have a urgency and a commitment like our hair is on fire to escape samsara. But to do that, you want to have a middle way effort, right? And so a balanced middle way approach to the two. And again, this is the catalyst for the Buddha's middle way approach to philosophy. Now, for the Mahayana, who come later, they don't have this tension. They have quite a nice approach. And again, right view is strongly right in there in the six perfections. But the Mahayana take it from right view, then they change it to right joyful effort, right? From right effort to right joyful effort. Right away, the Mahayana bring this sense of joy into it. And they talk about joyful effort being like joyful diligence, embodying a sense of joy and enthusiasm in our practice, right? This positivity is there, right? An effort that's sustainable and nourishing rather than depleting. So as a lot of us know, when we put a lot of effort into something and we overdo it, it's quite depleting, isn't it? For those who have done charity work, if you push too hard in volunteering, working with others, especially in difficult situations, they lead to burnout, right? They can just be depleting, where right effort, and especially right joyful effort, is different. It's an effort that is truly sustainable, and let alone is it not depleting, it's actually nourishing. It actually gives back to us, right? And it's kind of that idea of taking delight in positive effort and action, delighting in cultivating the good, according to the sutras. And they often talk about the difference with right view having to do with the bodhisattva. And I think this is just a story. I don't think you'll find this in the sutras, but I was told this in the monasteries, that because the bodhisattva has this commitment to taking rebirth over and over again until everyone is enlightened, then they say, well, then the bodhisattva should enjoy himself. Since that's what I learned in the monastery. Since you're going to come back lifetime after lifetime, you should just enjoy yourself. So because of the bodhisattva's vow, they say that he has that. He should enjoy himself. Unlike the Theravada, who's just trying to escape samsara, and he can try with it like his head's on fire to do that. But since we're just going to be coming back, and in many cases they believe for eons, then bodhisattvas are allowed to enjoy themselves. So they practice a light, joyful effort. So now in SBT, we believe in joyful effort, but we often talk about practicing a soft and joyful effort, right? And exertion. We take it a step further and really embody a beautiful style of effort. So when we talk about soft effort, we talk about soft effort as being calm and gentle and patient. It's expansive, accepting and enduring. It's adaptive, flexible, and resilient. And it's simply a more skillful and productive form of effort. And if you don't believe me, let's take a look at Ajahn Sumedho. I have a quote for you right here. Ajahn Sumedho is one of the really gifted Theravada writers of the day. He wrote this beautiful, beautiful quote. And I was surprised hearing this from Theravada, because it's like the Mahayana seems to have more of this view. Right effort is a soft thing that you relax into. It's a total acceptance of the present moment and our present awareness. And I can read this over and over again. I think it's magnificent. And it's just so true that, when you accept the world the way it is, and yet we're trying to make it better, and you accept your own awareness, then making effort into your life becomes a soft thing. It's more of a relaxed thing, right? Because it's a balanced view, because it's supported by right view. What do you guys think? Any ideas? What do you guys think of this idea of right effort? And are you applying it? How many people have mastered this one?
Yeah.
Oh, we know you have. You're already. Now on, please.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking about when I go to the gym, working out at the gym is kind of an intense activity. You're trying really hard to put out a lot of energy and stuff. But I kind of also understand having a mental state of accepting where you're at right now and everything. It's kind of a tricky balance, but it's very interesting.
Very much so. And it changes for every situation. But it is finding that middle, right? Even things that have a lot of exertion to do it wisely. Like you make a great point with exercise, especially for some of us that are getting older. We want to get into the gym and work out to get in shape and feel better. But if you push too hard, we can hurt ourselves, which is unproductive, right? Then you're laid up and you can't work out for a while, or you can damage yourself in other ways. And so the idea is to work out with right effort, which means bringing wisdom in, right? And skills, knowing how to do it in a smart way, knowing how to do it properly, right? Having a trainer to show you how to do it the right way, and then putting the effort in that way. Yeah, it's a great example. Thank you, Noah. Oh, David, please.
Why do you think, Tarpa, that the sort of extreme advice recurs? I mean, my understanding is that even in the Mahayana, in the Tibetan tradition, people like Milarepa exemplified starving and just eating nettles and things like that.
It's true. And don't we find that in all spirituality, there's something about, it's almost like humans think we have to punish ourselves to reach awakening, don't we?
Yeah.
You have some really strong Catholic groups that would do that in the past, whip their backs. But throughout the ages, I think all the traditions have found pain as being this way towards spirituality. But sometimes I wonder if it's actually a very physical thing, if just that they realize when they torture their body, it releases endorphins, and they actually do get a kind of a buzz from it, and then they mistake that for actual spiritual achievement, which it isn't, right? It's temporary.
Thanks, that's brilliant.
So it's a good question. And even in the Mahayana, the one thing about the yogis like Milarepa, it sounds like they're really punishing themselves. But my teacher told me he spent 7 years in a cave, and he said, "Oh, you Westerners have it all wrong." He said my cave was delightful. For them, it was such a delight to get away from the noisy monastery and the headkeep, the disciplinarian and everything. For Tibetans, the caves were the only place to get peace and quiet. So my teacher loved it. He said, "Oh, I had all my books, I had all my things." And so I think maybe they didn't suffer as much as we think that they do. But you can think of modern traditions. Sometimes Zen seems like they're pretty strict, and they seem to punish themselves a bit. But Buddhism is founded on the fact that the Buddha is rejecting that strong asceticism. The Buddhism is based on, founded on the Buddha's rejection of suffering and pain used in spiritual practice completely. And the Buddha accepts the idea of comfort in practice, as long as it's not in excess, right? But the Buddha, in one of our prayers, we actually have that line, right? So, yeah, the Buddha accepts this middle way, and it's often considered a middle way between ascetic Jainism and the housekeeper of the Brahmins of the time. So he's kind of in the middle of the two. Miss Wamo?
Yeah, I think part of the intensity with effort, especially for Mahayana, might be that if you have the perspective that you had this opportunity to be born in a human body, and that's a really rare, privileged thing, that you want to really take full advantage of that opportunity because you don't know if you're going to get it again. So I think they have this attitude of like, you better take advantage of the fact that you were born in this human body because you might come back as who knows what next time. So you better like really apply yourself. And I think that's where a lot of that attitude comes from for that
I think so
intensity.
too, and I think that that's a great description of the fire sermon. Of that's what
Hmm.
they mean by practice like your head's on fire because of that, right? But then
Yeah,
how we apply ourselves is different. So I don't think in that sermon the Buddha's not really giving practice instruction because
yeah,
it seems clear that the Buddha's constantly talking about that middle way style of practice. Now,
yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out, Christian makes a really good point in a chat comment here. He says, selecting where to put effort is my biggest conundrum. And boy, I can really relate to that. There's so many times when I'm sitting wondering, what should I do next? And there's just so many choices that it can be uh, really confusing. And, setting priorities in our lives sounds like a simple activity, but it's really very confusing at times. So.
beautifully said, and it's so true. So we have that. Where do we put our effort, and then what intensity is our effort? Because we're saying a middle way, a joyful effort, but that also changes by different events. So we want to have that sense of we have that intensity knob, and different things we do will have different effort to it. But this comes back to the idea of the Buddha describes the reason we're in samsara is based on our speediness, our busyness, our sense of immediacy, right? This is the energy that drives samsara. This is the energy that drives neurotic desire, desires that thirst we have that wants and wants and wants. And so you can't use that energy to get rid of that energy, right? Just like you can't use hatred to get rid of hatred. You can't have that intensity, that speediness, that kind of aggressive style of effort. You can't use that to get rid of samsara because that is the problem. That is what's feeding it. So you know what you end up with? You end up with the samsaric Buddhism, this samsaric effort in Buddhism. And you can see it in practitioners. Some of the monasteries that I stayed at that were, I've talked about it before. I stayed at a lot of very intense ones. And these monks thought that they were the greatest monks around and we're the only ones that know how to practice the Dharma the right way. And they were intense and unhappy and unbalanced. They were not good. Every time I saw one of those, they were not good. And it's because of that reason. They were using that kind of energy to try to awaken. So clearly, we have to do the opposite. We need an effort that calms us down, slows us down, gets rid of that sense of immediacy. An effort that's guided by right view of understanding the true nature of things. An effort that's accepting, that's accommodating, that's adaptive, right? And then, like we always talk about, joy is probably the greatest fuel for practice. In my opinion, this is true. And it's also, joy has been really diminished in the Buddhist teachings from the early days. When you look at the Theravada, some of the higher states of accomplishment through meditation, things are called the four joys. We see the word joy throughout the Buddhist teachings. In the sutras, clearly, joy, the word joy, let alone the attainment of it, but the usage of it is throughout the early sutras. But for some reason, people just kind of, more and more, they move away from it. Almost like spirituality is supposed to be this heavy subject you have to try hard at, and where I think it's quite the opposite. That's life, that's samsara. And to awaken, we need to find the lightness of joy. We need to use that to fuel our practice, right? So that's what right effort is for us. You can't climb out of samsara using the same energy that perpetuates your samsara, right? That has to be clear to everybody. So we want to escape samsara, we have to calm down. We have to be patient. We have to be loving, kind. Think about all the virtues we aspire to as Buddhists. They're all peaceful, aren't they? They're all calming. They're all patient. Compassion is very patient. Love is patient. Okay, I'm off my soapbox. David.
Yeah, with regard to Nawang's question, where to put effort, I know the answer to that question. Ask Tarpa. I mean, all that was said, that's true. It's true as well as being slightly.
I'm confused.
Well, if I'm asked, well, maybe I speak for myself. If I am not sure where to put my effort, I would ask you.
Oh, I understand. That was a straightforward question. So much of it depends on what they're, it brings up a really good point. I wasn't going to bring it up, but in the Theravada teaching, they have a thing called the four, let me see if I can remember what it was. The four strivings. And now this isn't my advice. This is just very canonical teachings. And the strivings were to limit all afflictions that you have. I'm going to paraphrase. The second one is to not let new afflictions arise. The third is to preserve all your good qualities. And the fourth is to not let them diminish or otherwise. If you're interested in that, I can post something to it. So that's kind of from the sutras. But I would say what we do, where we put effort, is very simple. It's in our practices. Our practices, our curriculum, lay out the whole path. If Buddhism seems confusing to folks, and you guys think, well, there's so many practices and there's so many study things, but guess what? Teachers make it easy. SBT has made it really, really easy. We have a curriculum, and if you're overwhelmed by other things, that curriculum is the only thing you have to focus on. That's the bare bones of it all. Now, we're very happy if you want to read other things, explore other things. I believe that the broader your knowledge base, the more you can contrast and compare. That's where real wisdom comes from, the ability to contrast and compare. So like some groups don't want you to read anybody else's material but the group. We're completely the opposite. We want you to get out there and see the world and study. This is healthy, right? So where do we put in the effort? First and foremost, I would say we've renamed the practice to the four aspects of awakening. One of my favorites, the one I do all the time, put your effort into developing a soft and beautiful mind, soft and beautiful speech, soft and beautiful behavior, and soft and beautiful effort. This is the one practice that seems to incorporate everything. When you practice that, you're committed, you're upholding all your vows, all your practices. To me, it really is the jewel of awakening. So that's one of our practices, but other practices as well. Put your effort into meditation, into mindfulness. How about the threefold path? Put your effort into developing higher awareness, higher virtue, higher understanding. I had it backwards, right? Put your effort into the eightfold path. Put your effort into your vows. Put your effort into your sangha and community. The beauty, the friendship here, this is really healthy for all of us. You don't come to sangha just because you might need it. You don't have many friends, whatever the reason, you just come because it's something you want. You come because it's healthy to be a part of a community. We all benefit each other, and you should come to the sangha equally for the benefit of others. That when you come, your presence benefits others as well. Long answer, sorry, David. Any questions, comments, or anything else?
John had a message in the chat.
Through the fire, then realize one needs water. Oh, I think that there's some truth to that, John. I think a lot of people tend to have to go through quite a bit of suffering before they feel they've gotten burned enough to seek out help, right? How many times especially when you're a teenager, right? You do something because everybody's doing it. You think it's what you want. And eventually you get to the point where, oh, this is miserable. I don't want. So I think a lot of us come to the Dharma after dealing with samsara and getting sick of it and really realizing we want freedom from it all. So yeah, it's quite the path to renunciation, right? Renunciation is the wish for freedom. So oftentimes we really have to come to terms with the idea that we're suffering deeply before we look for salvation. Good point, John. Okay, hey, how about we talk about a couple? My favorite part of the teaching. Why does any of this matter? Right? What does this have to do with my life? Why should I care about this? This is something I think every Buddhist teaching should have halfway through. And why this matters is because right joyful effort is simply a superior effort. Hands down, no question. I can say that because I've done the work, I've experienced it, and there's just no doubt about it. You can do it yourself. You can practice slowing down. Joyful effort is often, maybe we should also call it patient effort. And not just patient with others, but really patient with ourselves, right? And sometimes when we slow down and we become patient, I find like when I work, I tend to, on the computer, I write and I work in a frantic kind of a mode. And that more and more I'm learning how to, because I always feel like there's a deadline or something coming. But then I find that when I slow down and calm down, I actually do more work. It's better work with far less mistakes. So there's a wisdom to this, right? That this is a wise, patient effort that realizes that really quality work has to be done in this calmer, more patient way. And the fact that this is, as I mentioned before, this type of effort is truly sustainable and nourishing. When you calm down in your efforts, in your practices, right? It does create the sense that this is something that you can continue. You eliminate that burnout effect, right? I've seen so many people go into retreat and they proclaim to the world, I'm not coming out until I'm enlightened. And they go in, they say, I'm going to go in for 3 years. And they come out in 2 months and they're just turned inside out. Just because they didn't have the right effort. They just were too intense. They were practicing like their hair was on fire. It's not sustainable. It's not healthy. So this right view, it's wise, it's skillful, and ultimately the most productive. So, again, We're not just talking about Buddhist practice. We're talking about effort in anything. We're talking about when you go to your job, right? Even if you have to do fast work, like you think, what happens if I have a deadline? Even fast work can still have this aspect of objectivity. It can still be, you can work fast and efficient and still be soft and joyful and kind to yourself and patient, right? Doesn't have to do with speed. You can still get the work done. And then how about we talk about how to engage in right view? Right effort. So one of the first things you want to do is to clearly understand the benefits of soft effort. This clarity really helps you put it into practice. So that's number one, to study it, listen to this teaching again, whatever it is, but clearly understand those benefits. Number two is to develop a daily determination to engage in soft effort. We have a soft effort mentioned in our affirmations, but each day have that determination that today I'm going to apply this soft, patient, joyful effort in everything I do. And then some of the ways we do it is by calming down, slowing down, and developing this patient style of practice, right? Yeah, I keep coming back to that word patience. I think that that might be the key word to the whole thing, right? They call it right joyful effort, but maybe it really is patient effort, right? Joyful, patient effort. Any final questions, anybody? Patience, stillness? Yeah, kind of. Yeah, they're kind of related. Good point, John. What do you think? Do you think that's beneficial to your practice? Miss Wamo, please.
I know everyone has gone through this, and I was wondering, what is your best advice when you kind of are going through a practice slump, when your meditations just aren't being productive, when you're just having a lot of trouble in your practice? What is your best advice for getting out of those slumps?
So first thing is you want to accept it. Slumps happen to everybody. And also remember that our practice is always an ebb and a flow, right? Sometimes we're really into it. We're having great practice. And oftentimes for unknown reasons, for whatever the reason, like sometimes I'll have a week where my meditations are just off the charts and I just seem to really be inspired. So clearly you're going to have the opposite as well. So allow for a little bit of that. But if you really get in a slump, usually there's two things that are there. Is the developing clarity. Go back and remind yourself of why you're doing this, right? If you're in a slump, chances are your goals and your aims aren't very clear in your mind. You know, in a lot of Buddhists, traditional Buddhism would tell you to reflect on samsara and pain and suffering and hell realms and bad rebirth and all those things. But to me, the opposite. Reflect on all the positive qualities. Reflect on how good it feels when you practice and think about those good qualities that we're trying to achieve. You know, we have our practice we did today on taking the final result as the path. That's probably one of the great meditations to get you out of a slump. And that practice, we visualize ourselves as awakened beings and what that would feel like. And the clarity that produces when you come out and you're like, yeah, that's what I'm trying to do. Those are my goals. That's what an awesome life looks like. That would be an awesome existence. And then, you know, it gives you that clarity, right? I think that would do it. And the other one is call me up and I'll inspire you. Yeah. Any other thoughts or comments, anybody? I hope that this helps inspire all of you for your practice. So you kind of got the gist of it, right? We're just talking about this. We don't have to practice like our hair is on fire. The Buddha gives us permission. So we're talking about slow, steady practice, aren't we? We're not talking about quitting your job and joining a monastery. We're just talking about slow and steady. Wins the race, right? The Buddha must have known all about the turtle and the hare. That's what we're talking about with right effort. It's a calm, patient. It's a beautiful effort, isn't it? It's a soft, beautiful, joyful effort. Be patient with yourself. Don't get into immediacy. Realize that practice takes time. It's about building those habits consecutively. It's about trying to do soft daily practice. For a lot of people, they'll try really hard, and you notice they can't keep it up very long. they'll get about 4 days in of those intense meditations, and then something will happen and they can't continue. So, yeah, that's what we want to do. And so we're all trying to gain happiness. Now, you can believe, like my teachers told me, that they gave me the ideas that, well, if I work hard, one day in the very far future, I'll become awakened and then I'll be happy. It might take eons, Tenzin Tarpa, but don't worry, one day you'll be a Buddha and be happy. I couldn't deal with that, right? The idea is practice starts today. The results you should be getting them today. Bringing this joy into your effort means enjoying your practice, right? Calm down. See the beauty in your practice. It's not on your list of things you have to do. It's not up there with eating soybeans and doing yoga and whatever other obnoxious thing we all have to do nowadays. Eat our supplements. This should be, our practice should be something, should be an act, a practice of beauty. Find the beauty in your practice, that soft effort. Okay, I've talked enough. My jaw's getting sore. So, with that said, hey, we're still in the middle of our retreat and we got all kinds of fun stuff coming, but I'd like to talk about some of the upcoming programs we have. So we're currently just finishing up our Introduction to Meditation Level 3. We got a couple more weeks left of that. That's been great. That's been a great success throughout the whole spring. We did 3 programs of our Introduction to Meditation. This month coming up begins Sakadawa, which is they often call it Buddha Day, the celebration of the Buddha's birth, death, and awakening. We practice it throughout the month, and then we have the day of Sakadawa itself, which will be the last Sunday of June during our next retreat. And you can read about Sakadawa and how to practice it and prepare for it on our website. Our Skillful Living program is coming up, which is the flagship of our programs. Very excited. We do it. We offer it twice a year. And this year it'll start on June 22nd. You can register for that program online. It's a program that, like the name implies, is aimed sharing the Buddha's wisdom in order to live a skillful, productive, wonderful life. And hey, this Sunday we have our Sangha Spotlight program with our dear Tenzin Tashi. That's going to be Wednesday at 1900 UTC. We're excited about that. So with that said, why don't we end today's class with our altruistic affirmation? May all be healthy, may all be prosperous, may all be well, may all be present, free of past regret and future worry, may all abide in constant appreciation, which is the source of great joy and contentment. May all realize their true nature and the true nature of reality, which is awakening. Thanks everybody for coming. As far as our retreat goes, in about a half an hour from now, We have our vow and purification ceremony. Everybody's welcome to attend. It's a beautiful ceremony. It's quite short. And we have 2 people taking refuge today. After that, we will finish our retreat with a loving kindness meditation, which is quite beautiful, and we'll do have a little bit of Sangha chat as well. So we got lots of stuff planned for the rest of the day. Thanks everybody for joining me. I hope some of the stuff I shared with you, it will benefit your practice. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Bye-bye.